A young soldier was operating a traffic control point in between downtown Baghdad and Baghdad International Airport. A Mercedes-Benz vehicle, despite signs saying drive at 25 kilometers per hour or less, slow down, come up slowly and approach the traffic control point, sped at speeds up to 60 miles per hour at this young soldier's checkpoint. The young soldier and his colleagues lit up the Mercedes. They shot it. They perceived it, reasonably so, as a potential vehicle-borne IED. Legally and tactically, he did the absolute right thing.
The concept of action versus reaction is really simple. It's the idea that if you're an actor, if you're the person that's going to perpetrate a crime, you've already premeditated, you've thought through what it is that you want to do. The reactor, the person that the crime is being perpetrated against, is really having to respond to that, doesn't necessarily know exactly what's going to occur.
If you've got a bad guy out there and he's coming at you, a lot of times there's a perception that you have to wait for him to make the first move so that you can react and then thus be justified. But that actually puts you at a severe disadvantage.
Sir, stop right there! Sir, stop right there! Drop the gun!
How do we deal with this aggressive threat? What's the right level of response? How do we drop them? What are all of those things that we need to do to win the day? A sentry is out there with really not a whole lot of experience yet in the service, with not a whole lot of training background, and is faced with making some very challenging real-world decisions as life unfolds, unfortunately, very rapidly before their eyes.
It all starts off with a bright white light and a sound that you've never heard of before. In that instant, you don't quite know everything that's going on.
The person who makes the initial action is actually going to have a tremendous advantage over you, to the point of, studies have shown it can be a second and a half, depending on the situation, 2 seconds of sitting there trying to figure out how to react. So this, in that amount of time while you're trying to figure out the proper way to react.
Drop the knife! Release the hostage! Drop the knife now!
Not only does he get the jump on you, he's done with whatever he's doing before you can even move.
Situations like these almost always arise in completely unexpected ways and at the most inopportune moments. Without proper training, security personnel have little opportunity to successfully respond to these kinds of engagements. We train you to understand the concept of action versus reaction, so that you will be better prepared when a crisis arises. We never want you to be caught in situations like the one you just saw. And because of that, it's important to know that the perpetrator always has the edge, because he knows the plan.
Action versus reaction, 99 times out of 100, the person initiating the action is going to win. If you are a threat to me, I have a certain number of reaction intervals I have to do. First of all, you present threatening behavior towards me, I have to understand that there is threatening behavior coming towards me. That's one reaction interval. Then I have to formulate an appropriate response to that threatening behavior. There's another reaction interval. Then I have to send a message mentally for my body to start implementing my response to that threatening behavior. There's a third reaction interval. So I have 3 reaction intervals added on to a decision on your part that is just do. I have to then figure out, what is it? How do I respond to this? Start the response process and then effectively carry out that response.
Do I pull my weapon out and shoot them? Do I step behind a barricade? Do I run? Do I run at them? Do I run away from them? What is it that I need to do? All of those things take time in the response mechanism, which of course give an even greater advantage to the person that is doing the acting, if you will.
The bad guy has already set up and observed, oriented, and decided when to strike us. They're just waiting to act. And that acronym I just worked around there is called an OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act.
The faster you can do all that, the more of an advantage you have against an adversary.
And the bad guy is always ahead of us in that power curve. They're sitting there waiting to hit the clacker on the IED. They're sitting waiting there to walk up and put a pistol on your head and shoot you.
Being able to act faster than he can observe your action, orient himself to it, decide on the proper response, and before he can act, you've already moved on.
When you know ahead of time what to do and how to handle a given situation, you gain confidence in your ability to respond appropriately under pressure. It's vital that you take this training seriously. Pay attention to details you're being taught. Know them inside out. Don't underestimate the value this knowledge can bring. Knowing your weapon, being familiar with your surroundings, and properly recognizing a threat all give you the edge.
They need to be confident that they can make the decisions that are necessary.
When my gunner we got hit and he turned to point his gun at that car to cover it, he knew his weapon was condition 1. He was ready to rock and roll, ready to cover me if I needed him to. I knew my M4 was condition 1.
If the situation goes south on them and they do have to use deadly force, they do have to take a life or attempt to take a life, they need to have the confidence that they've got the training, that they've made the right decisions, and that they're doing it for the right reason.
You know, if we take your typical sentry, we are putting that individual in a position where they are always going to be the reactor. They're always going to be behind the power curve. So as they're faced with that challenge, what we have to realize is that we have to put them in a situation where they can win.
It's important to see how making a judgment early on can change the fight. In the following reenactment, the bad guy has a knife and is more than 30 feet away from the sentry, who is armed with a 9mm. Watch what happens.
Sir, step back away from my post, sir. Sir, stop. Sir, stop. Stay back away from my post, sir. Step back.
A trained sentry would recognize that a guy with a knife inside of 30 feet presents a hostile threat and would have already drawn his weapon. Because this sentry doesn't recognize the threat in time, he's unable to respond to the threat. The bad guy has already closed the distance and achieved the advantage. In this scenario, either one could win. Now, you'd think someone with a knife always loses to someone with a firearm, but not this time.
They have a weapon, they have hostile intent. You need to not worry about you have more power than they do at your disposal, because if you wait long enough, that power is useless.
Escalation of force is a linear solution to a non-linear world. Unfortunately, in a deadly force encounter, if you decide to attack me right now, I don't have the ability to say, hey, stop attacking me. If you keep attacking me, I'm going to resort to deadly force, and then I'm going to, show you my weapon, shout at you, shove you with my weapon, and then shoot you with my weapon. Now, by the time I go through that procedure, I'm dead. You've had your way with me, and you're on to the next guy.
The problem is that risk aversion causes people to vapor lock in their thinking process. They're more worried about not getting near the line than they are about solving the problem. So that's one of the problems we have with ROE writing is that it becomes so lawyer specific. So how am I going to save myself if something goes wrong, that they don't think about how it hamstrings the person who's actually in charge of protecting the asset.
Not everybody out there is going to be a bad guy, and you basically have to keep all these different gambits of information processing so that you can ultimately make a good decision.
At the end of the day, the key is to recognize in almost any deadly force encounter that action always beats reaction. Since this is the case, you as the armed sentry have to use judgment and respond with the appropriate level of force. Realizing ahead of time that you will be behind the power curve and knowing that you have the law on your side will allow you to make the right judgment.